Welcome to ToughBuild's Garage. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be jumping back on the 2016 Ford Mustang EcoBoost. And we're going to show you how to take off your turbo and how to put it back on the right, correct way. I'm going to go through every little step, so make sure that you follow along. If you guys are doing an aftermarket turbo, always keep in mind it's the same steps for the same damn car. So let's go ahead and jump into it. First things first, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and take off the weight off of the motor mount, and there's a reason why you want to take this off, so we're going to go ahead and do this first. $10mm, and what we're going to do is we're going to take off the charge pipe from the turbo. Ordinary, to completely remove your guys' charge pipe, what we need to take off next is going to be this spring clamp right here. If you have an aftermarket blow-off valve, you're going to have this valve right here. This hose leads to your blow-off valve, which we need to remove ordinary to take that charge pipe completely out of the vehicle. We have to remove the bare intake. It's going to encounter a flathead screwdriver, and that's all you're going to do is unloosen the clamp. Unplug the sensor, pull the tabs, pull out the air box. This part here is held on by a 10mm bolt. So what we're going to go ahead is remove that bolt that sits here and go ahead and lift out the box. Now we're going to shoot over to the inlet of the turbo. This is going to be where your intake is. This is also going to encounter using a flathead screwdriver. Now that you have successfully removed the hose clamp, we're going to go ahead and remove the intake. 2. Don't forget to unplug this girl here. Snap on. It's just an easy pulling it up, pulling it back, snapping it off. Now we have all the vacuum lines that we have to release from all the turbo valves, such as your wastegate. At this point, you're going to want to go ahead and take off your skid plate and ordinary to get to your cork on your radiator. We're going to go ahead and drain the radiator, because if you don't do this, you're going to have a complete mess. Let me go ahead and show you where that cork is, and we're going to get started. Ordering your car, the best thing to do is get a hose. Okay? So right on the side is where your cork is. Make sure that this is aligned, because it's going to make a mess. We are finally at the final step of this project, ladies and gentlemen. There's only 2 more steps that we have to follow. Ordinary to take off the turbo. So let's go ahead, stop yapping, start working. Go ahead and do next is we're going to go ahead and take off the coolant feed. Now be really careful with this, because it is going to spill. We're going to pull off the coolant feed, and then we have to pull off the oil feed and the oil drain tube, which is located on the bottom of the turbo. This here bolt is an 8mm, the oil feed is an 8mm, and the oil drain tube is a 10mm, because Ford thought they would be silly and go ahead and put a 10mm at the bottom of the turbo. We are on the last part, and the last part is the oil drain tube. Now we are at the final step, and you guys know what the final step is, and that is getting these bolts off the turbo to release the turbo. And that's pretty much how you're going to remove your turbo. I believe they're 15mm. You're going to grab your long old thing here, 13 deep socketer, and take the heat shield off first. You're going to take the heat shield, you're going to bend it backwards, and then you have 2 more which hold the turbo to the manifold. At this point, you should be exactly where I'm at. Now, you do not see a turbo there. No, I did not show removing it, but it was pretty easy. Once you get the bottom two out and you get the two exhaust nuts off, you just go ahead and pull it right out. If you did everything like I told you, including the drain tube on the bottom of the turbo, the feed on the top of the turbo, and the two coolant lines that go to the turbo on the side. You don't have to remove the wastegate, it is not needed. Here we go. Here's the turbo right here, brand new wastegate right there. Stay tuned, because the next video coming is going to be the video about installing this wastegate to a point where you don't have to take off the turbo. Gasket's on, let's go ahead and throw the turbo on. Let your turbo hang there as you grab your nuts. Well, here's the nuts, ladies and gentlemen. Now we gotta do this evenly. In a crisscross pattern, you're gonna use a 13mm to get your nuts back onto your turbo. And go ahead and tighten until snug. Grab your torque wrench, set it to 37 foot-pounds of torque. Only tighten down the bottom ones. Now we're gonna remove the top nuts. Before we go ahead and put on our heat shield, there's two hoses that we still have to connect. Make sure when you connect your coolant line, I'll give you an example. When you're tightening your coolant line and you're putting your coolant line on, they do sit just like that in your turbo. The small one goes first. The big nipple sits right on top of it. So basically you put that one first, you set that one on top of it. Make sure that you push this one all the way in, because you definitely don't want to deal with any coolant leaks. If you have to, go ahead and hammer this one in a little bit gently, because remember, these are aluminum pieces here that we're dealing with. Gently tap it in and you should be good. The coolant line should now be set in place. Make sure you put the screw in. You can tighten it till snug. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take your oil feed line, which is the one that sits right here at the top. You should hear a subtle click. Now, like I said, the coolant line and the oil feed line are both 8mm bolts. Now, your oil drain line is located underneath the turbo. Once again, Ford decided to be silly and went ahead and put it underneath the turbo. But that's where it typically is anyways. So you have a 10mm bolt for your oil drain tube. And we also are going to need our 10mm socket. Now, if you didn't move your oil drain line at all, it should be super duper easy to put it back in. Mine is now back in. Let's go ahead and drop the bolt. Your oil drain tube that goes up to your turbo can be frustrating. I'm telling you that right now. It definitely can be frustrating. So when you get it on, just make sure that you have it set in that position already. So when you slap the turbo down, it's sitting pretty much like this, right above the hole that it needs to go into. That's all you got to do is push it in, put the bolt in, and the bolt will do the rest of the work for you. You don't have to worry about, you know, making sure. Just double check your work, that's all I'm saying. Double check your work, make sure that the oil drain tube is on, make sure that your oil feed is on, and make sure that your coolant lines are completely flat. I can't stress that enough. The next step we're going to go ahead and do, which I like to do before I put the heat shield back on through the turbo, is the exhaust studs. So that is what we're going to do. I'm not going to go ahead and show this because it does take a long time, and I want to make this video short and sweet for you guys at home that are putting a new turbo on your car. After you have gotten your exhaust bolts bolted correctly, make sure that you cannot stick a piece of paper through it if you have an aftermarket downpipe that requires that skinny filter. The donut filter, you really don't have to worry too much about those because it really does seal when you bring it together. But these are a pain in the booty. So you need to make sure that you tighten each side one at a time, one at a time, one at a time when you get them completely flush. You want to make sure that both sides are complete flush. Don't leave any gaps between both sides or you will have exhaust leaks. And when you have exhaust leaks, what happens, people? You start going lean, rich, because your computer's trying to figure out and trying to save your motor, basically. So the motor doesn't know how much air is really coming in or how much fuel is being added. So it tells the injectors, hey, we need to add more fuel. Keep adding, because we're still losing. We're losing something. Something's going on. So make sure that all your hoses and everything are completely clamped down and completely bolted on. All right, this is the part of the heat shield. You have your heat shield. So there's a way to take it off and there's a way to put it back on. And the best way I can really tell you is it has to be bent a certain way. So make sure that it's bent, because you're gonna have to shove this side in first. Now keep doing that, keep wiggling it until it gets all the way down, and then go ahead and put your torque screw back onto the bottom. Don't forget this screw right here. Okay, this is very, very important to put back on. This is the turbo. And then we're gonna go ahead and put the 2 bolts back. All right, this girl, it's time to put her back on. So this goes back onto your motor mount. It gets torqued down to 21 foot-pounds of torque. Gonna grab your torque wrench once again, and we're gonna tighten down the 2 nuts that go to the heat shield. 37 inch-pounds, folks. At this point, you're gonna want to make sure you put all your air lines back on. So one goes to your wastegate, one goes in the bottom of your wastegate, pretty much on the turbine, and then the other one goes right here, right next to the inlet. Next thing we're going to go ahead and jump to is we're going to go ahead and put the charge pipe back on, since it's off now. And once we put the charge pipe back in, you guys should already know, put coolant into your reservoir, and that's pretty much going to include today's video.